Hello, welcome to my channel. Thank you for coming and watching this video. This isn't a video I feel super comfortable making. I don't know why, I just think the whole world of breastfeeding, bottle feeding, feeding your baby is it just feels quite a sensitive one. And I don't really know why, because I don't know why. I think I think it's the one thing where I'm a bit nervous of offending anyone or saying anything that people disagree with, which normally I don't really mind about, but I don't know why. I feel like there's just something about breastfeeding that's just quite personal. But anyway, it's one of my most highly requested videos, and there's definitely been a lot of stuff that's come up for me when feeding that I just did not expect and has really thrown me. And so if I can help someone else know that those kind of things might happen, then I feel like it's worth making the video. So please bear with me, just getting comfy. If there's some things I say that you don't agree with, or that you, I don't know, just please be nice. Anyway, so if you haven't watched before, I've got Jet, who's 2.5, and Nova, who's 9 months. So Jet, who's 2.5, I breastfed him until he was 9 months. I kind of like exclusively fed him, I think maybe till about the point when he was being weaned and starting to eat, so maybe like 6 months. I think I started introducing a bit of formula or kind of express milk bottles between 6 months and 9 months, and then fully stopped at 9 months. I have never loved breastfeeding. I wanted to breastfeed because I think it's just the easiest option. Like, you don't need to be worrying about bottles and formula and remembering to have anything with you. You just have got your boobs ready and raring to go. So I kind of knew I wanted to for that sense, but I've never been someone that is excited to feed or really kind of finds the bond really special or anything. I was lucky that with Jet it did come really easily. About 6 months, when he was sitting up and starting to eat, I started to become more and more uncomfortable with feeding and just I didn't like doing it much out and about, because I think from about 4 months onwards, when they start becoming really aware of their surroundings, I found when I was feeding him, he'd then start looking around the room and getting really distracted, and it just felt hard to kind of like keep him on me to feed him. I just started to not want to do it more and more. But when Jet was 8 months, we had a trip booked in to go see my sister in Zimbabwe, and I always had it in the back of my mind that it would be easier if I could still be breastfeeding him for that trip, just so there was like less to think about. I didn't need to take formula, I didn't have to kind of find sterilized water when we're staying in this hut in the mountains. I just didn't want to be thinking about it. I just wanted to be able to breastfeed him, and that would be that. So I kind of persevered, even though I felt like I kind of wanted to stop. I persevered till we'd had that trip, and then we came back at 9 months. I think I dropped the 10 o'clock feed and turned that to a formula feed. But honestly, within about 36 hours, I wasn't feeding him at all. It was the weirdest thing. I think I dropped a feed and then my supply just kind of disappeared. It was really weird. It was really sudden. I didn't have a last feed. Again, I think because I wasn't sentimental about it, I didn't feel the need to kind of have this last feed that I really soaked up with my baby, because that was never something that I really did as a breastfeeder. So I kind of had a last feed without really realizing, and then, yeah, I can't really remember because it was quite a while ago now, obviously 2 years ago. I'll go into more detail with Nova because that's obviously been very recent, or I'm kind of living it now. But yeah, basically Jet was quite straightforward, dropped a feed and then ended up kind of just dropping it all. Then with Nova, her birth was really straightforward, and breastfeeding again started really straightforwardly. One thing I would say that I wasn't expecting, that just because you fed before, with the second, it's still a completely new experience. So it's a completely new baby that has to learn how to feed again, and so it's not just kind of, oh, I know what I'm doing, we'll be fine. I think I did. There is an element of that, because you maybe just feel that bit more confident, or you know what you're aiming for, you know in your head like what it is for the baby to latch. But it is still just a completely new baby that might have just a completely different anatomy. And another thing that I wasn't expecting was how painful it is when you are breastfeeding in the first kind of 2 days after birth. Breastfeeding initiates your uterus to start contracting back, and that is incredibly painful. I remember finding it painful with Jet, but it was only for a couple of feeds. And I remember the first feed, we came home that evening, he was like 24 hours old, and I was sitting on the sofa, sitting here, started feeding him, and just came over in flu type symptoms, so hot and cold, really shivery, just felt really just ill. And I found having a hot water bottle on my tummy while feeding him really helped, and then I kept dosed up on painkillers. So with Nova I was kind of prepped for that. I knew to have a hot water bottle to have painkillers, but it was a whole nother level of pain and lasted a lot longer. I feel like it lasted a good kind of 4 or 5 days. I'd kind of dread when I knew each feed was coming. It's like intense period pains, like really deep inside you. The advice I would pass on is to kind of have a hot water bottle prepped, painkillers. Hopefully it just lasts a couple of days while your uterus is contracting back. But yes, so with Nova, breastfeeding was really straightforward. She was a really good baby. She latched fine and I fed her just exclusively. With Jet actually, once he'd gone past the 10 days when you're discharged and I knew he'd put back on all his birth weight and was growing well, I found that he was a very feedy baby, but I could tell a lot of it was just for comfort, and he was just wanting to feed even when he wasn't hungry. And then that meant sometimes he was feeding and then he was being sick a bit because he was taking a milk that he didn't want. He just was wanting to suck for comfort. And so at about 2 weeks I introduced a dummy, and that made such a difference, because then for 2 weeks I was able to get a little bit more sleep. So because I knew he was putting back on weight, so I knew he was feeding enough. If he woke in the night, I was going with the kind of 3-hourly mindset. So in the night I knew that he'd roughly wake at kind of 1 a.m-ish and 4 a.m-ish. And so if he woke at 1 and fed and then woke again at like 2:30, I'd try just comforting him first, then try giving him the dummy, and if that settled him back down, great. If he kept crying, then I'd feed him, because obviously you need to listen to them, and maybe he's going through a growth spurt or he's just hungrier that night. But I'd have that in the back of my mind, so I wouldn't just instantly pick him up and feed him. I'd try a few other things first, and often that would settle him till more the kind of like 4 a.m. type feed. But Nova just quickly settled into that kind of time frame a lot quicker than Jet, and just had no interest in a dummy. I tried to give her a dummy and she was so dramatic and was really gaggy and just ridiculous. But then at about a week she found her thumb, which was very sweet. So I think as well that's why she fell into a better routine, because she'd self-settle from quite little, because she would cry and then just find her own thumb and fall back to sleep. But yeah, anyway, so I exclusively breastfed her. I found it really positive. I found it really easy, because with Jet as well, getting out the house, I didn't need to be thinking about bottles and formula. I just knew I was ready to go, and if we were out and she suddenly needed feeding, I kind of followed her routine in the day, and I could just kind of feed her wherever, whenever. If we're at the park, I don't need to be kind of warming up milk or anything. So I did appreciate that, and it worked well. But for me, there's just never been the bonding side necessarily of breastfeeding. And then again, the same thing kind of started happening at about 4 months. She'd start getting really distracted and looking around the room and pulling off, and my supply's always been quite full on, and so sometimes like mid-feed if they pull off and then you're like squirting milk across the room, which is very embarrassing. And so again, I just kind of started thinking, oh, I'm not really feeling this anymore. And I just start really craving kind of having my body back, being able to wear a normal bra, being able to wear clothes. I'd have to think about, can I get my boobs out? And I had a few different jobs and events or whatever in London, so there was a few times where I needed to have a full day away. So obviously if you're going to be away for the day, you need to express or have formula for them, but then also if you are still feeding, you need to keep your body in the same routine. So there was one day, it was actually a spa day, it was lovely, went for a spa day with my sister, and I had to take my pump with me, and you know, kind of at 2 points throughout the day, go into the toilets and pump loads of milk and then chuck it away. And to be honest, I just couldn't really be bothered with doing that. It's just another thing to think about. That's kind of how I knew we were getting to the point where it was maybe time that we were ready to stop. So at about 4 months, I introduced a bottle. And luckily, I know a lot of people have issues with this, but luckily she took to it fine. It didn't seem to even really notice. So maybe she didn't find breastfeeding much of a bond either, like I didn't, I don't know. She just didn't seem bothered, took a bottle fine. At about 6 months, when she was starting to eat and I knew she was getting really good nutrients and everything she needed, or a lot of what she needed from her food, I then was like, okay, now is the time, let's do this. I think as well, for a long time I'd kept saying like, oh, I think I'm ready to stop breastfeeding, but it's one of those weird things where you have to actually be proactive, and you don't stop unless you stop, and you kind of need to actually, one day you have to wake up and be like, okay, today I'm going to start the process. And I just kept days just kept kind of going on, and I just keep feeding her, and it just kind of never quite happened. So at 6 months, because we were in this whole new routine anyway, I've done a whole video about it actually, we then also moved her out of our bedroom, and so I then completely stopped, went kind of cold turkey breastfeeding her in the night, which is in a whole nother video that you can watch. And so it just all kind of felt like the natural time to then slowly stop breastfeeding in general. So I went cold turkey in the night and would just give her a bottle of warm water if she needed, or just comforted her. And she was in the other room anyway. She instantly stopped waking as much because I think my movements weren't waking her and stuff. Then we switched to the 10 p.m. feed being formula, and it instantly started making her sleep through the night, which was incredible. I think formula does fill them up a lot more. Over basically the course of a month, 7 months to 8 months, over that month, I just slowly started decreasing each feed, and I found it a lot trickier to do, just practically, than with Jet. With Jet, it was just really weird. Like I said, I stopped to feed, and then I feel like my whole body just decided that that was it and it was done. It was really bizarre. Whereas with Nova, it was just a much slower process. So I swapped the morning feed to be a formula feed and left that for like kind of a few days doing that. And each time I like took away a feed, my boobs would go a bit crazy again, and so they'd get a bit engorged, and I'd maybe just express like a tiny bit, like an ounce or two, just to relieve them slightly, but not kind of a full feed's worth. So I basically just like each feed slowly took away, and each time I took it away I let that settle for like a couple of days. I remember then I fed her one morning on a Saturday, and then I just left it all Saturday and all Sunday and didn't feed her at all. And then the Monday morning I was at a like play cafe with some friends, and I'd been all organised, got her powder ready, taken her bottle, and then left the powder at home. I just had the bottle of water, and no one had any spare formula powder, and she needed feeding. And so I didn't really know what to do, because I hadn't fed her since the Saturday and it was now the Monday. And so I just tried feeding her, and I definitely just had no milk, and it was really weird. It just felt really weird because she was trying to feed but there was no milk, and it just all felt very bizarre. And that was the end. So that was my last feed, but it wasn't really a feed, it was just a very weird experience. And then I knew that I was done. And so then I had to go out and buy some formula, because poor girl obviously didn't have any milk. And that was only maybe 2 weeks ago, three weeks ago, that I've like fully stopped. And so now she's just fully, all her feeds are formula, which takes me on to another side effect that I just had not realised, was not aware of at all, I don't feel like happened with Jet at all, is the kind of hormone imbalance and the mental side effects of stopping breastfeeding. I just had no idea about. Now obviously when I think about it, it makes complete sense, but I guess because I hadn't experienced it, it just wasn't on my radar. So when you feed, you release oxytocin, which is obviously this very happy, positive hormone. To suddenly stop feeding, you're not getting that fix of oxytocin, like endorphins and those kind of like happy hormones, which you also get from sunshine and exercise and laughing. And so your body just suddenly feels like it's just got real deficiency, is that the word? Like it's really lacking in those kind of happy hormones. As the lactation just completely dies out, your hormones as well are just completely imbalanced, as they kind of like refine the level that they now will carry on at as a non-milk producing person. And it affected me so much more than I was expecting, and I didn't realise it was that for a while. So after I stopped feeding her, I just started feeling really down, very emotional, quite extreme mood swings. Things would make me snap really easily, just getting really angry about stuff and then really sad about stuff, feeling like everything was too much of a weight. And Jet's going through quite a tricky stage at the moment where he's doing a lot of pushing and he's very physical and he's getting in a bit of trouble at nursery, and when I'm out with him he's quite hard work. I just couldn't cope with it, and it just completely overwhelmed me, and I felt like I was drowning in the responsibilities of parenthood. I didn't connect the two because that kind of felt like a good enough reason to feel overwhelmed, because he was hard work, and so I felt like if you feel swamped and you feel like you're drowning, that's just kind of motherhood. And then actually it was another lovely friend on Instagram, she mentioned something about how she'd stopped breastfeeding and how her hormones had been crazy, and that made me click that actually I'd had a few weeks of just feeling like life just wasn't very fun and wasn't very happy. And yeah, I just was really down and just very murky and a lot of anxiety. I just didn't feel myself, and I just felt like my brain was just a bit foggy. seeing her say that was like a light bulb moment where I realised that it had started kind of 2 weeks previously, just as the feeding was like getting less and less and less until it stopped. And instantly I feel like a weight was lifted off my shoulders, and I suddenly felt like, okay, I'm not depressed, I'm not kind of going through some sort of like delayed postnatal depression, I just have stopped feeding, and that this is just a side effect. And I think I still am getting it. I'm 3 weeks post feeding and I still feel like my mood swings are quite weird. I just keep feeling really, really overwhelmed. But what I find really comforting is knowing why, and knowing this isn't just me, this isn't just my life now, this is just a kind of side effect that I've just got to ride out. I've got to listen to my body if it's telling me things that I want to do. Know that it's normal and it will pass, and it's not a reflection on my happiness in my life, it's just my hormones trying to sort themselves out. Because I remember before I realised that that's what it was, and kept having this urge just to kind of run to a field, just like run away to a field and just run. And then I clocked, obviously, one of the main ways you release endorphins and oxytocin is by exercise, and I think my body was literally just saying, you need to go and exercise, like you need to just get your heartbeat going, get outside into the fresh air, breathe in the air, get some exercise. But I felt I was kind of associating that with that I just wanted to kind of run away and just, I don't know, it was weird. And as soon as I knew that that's what it was, I could kind of make sense of all those feelings and be like, yeah, I just need to go to the park and with Jet and get him on his scooter and jog alongside him and just get a bit of fresh air and a bit of exercise. And that made so much difference, and some sun and some, it's not a great time of year to stop feeding and to feel down, because obviously it's like grey and dark and rainy in England. To be honest, that's one of the main reasons I decided to make this video, because I would hate for anyone else to go through what I did not knowing that that's what it is. I think you just take so many knocks as a mum, and there's obviously such an incredible side of it, but the hard side of it is that you do grow a human which takes everything out of you. Then you go through birth, which, however positive it is still a ridiculously difficult ordeal. Then you have all the recovery. Then 3 months in, your hair starts falling out. Then it starts growing back, as you can see. Look at my lovely regrowth. And there are just side effects after side effects. Just been talking for so long, my camera turned off. That's not a good sign, so I'm gonna wrap up. But I just would hate anyone to go through this and not realise that that's what it is, or even to be able to prepare yourself for it. So if you know that you are thinking about stopping feeding, to put some things in place, to maybe put a bit of exercise and fresh air in place, and seeing friends and just doing things that make you feel happy. Maybe trying, if you have any friends or family around you, having an hour here or there away from your children just to do something for you. Bit of self-care goes a very long way. If you're watching this and you are thinking about stopping breastfeeding, please look after yourself. Anyway, I hope that was informative and helpful. I feel like I've just waffled for a long time, but if there's anything I didn't mention, or if you've got any questions or anything, please do comment below. This is very much like a two-way conversation on my channel and on the blog. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Have a lovely week, and we'll see you soon.